Hi everyone, this is Isaiah.
And this is Steven.
And we are back.
And it's like we never left.
Oh, we left.
We left.
It's been a while. We had really conflicting schedules, and so we're finally able to get back together and start recording more episodes of the single issue. So I'm excited about that.
I'm pretty, like I woke up and I was just like, yeah, we're gonna do this. Woo!
And we're doing it right now.
We're doing it.
So what you see on the screen today is actually the cover of the 5th issue of Transaltown, which is available for purchase right now. There'll be a link in the description below us. And the colors for this cover were actually done by a good friend of mine, Zach Q. Unfortunately, I don't have any video of the color work done, so you're just going to be seeing the ink here. And in the 5th issue of Transaltown, Timmy starts going to public school. He starts to get an education, and you know what else happens in school, Steven?
You get picked on. Oh, that happened to me.
Someone has a tragic school backstory.
Okay.
Because that's definitely not where I was going to go with this. I was going to make a smooth transition to our subject today.
Okay, well, next time, kids.
Which is art education. And the reason why I want to talk about art education is that I got to judge VASE, which is a scholastic event. It's an art scholastic event. And it was my first time getting to judge something like that. And I had not taken art in high school at all. I hadn't taken any art classes until college.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Huh.
really.
Huh.
And I noticed a very distinct difference between how art is taught in high school compared to how it's taught in college. And that's one of the things that I wanted to talk a bit about. And Steven, you took art in high school, right?
Yes, it did. All 4 years I was there.
Okay. And did you take any college courses?
I was always in the most advanced classes that would prepare you for college, for the college courses. But I never, took any like actual college classes. So
Okay, so yeah, that means that we have totally different perspectives on art education. And one of the things that I found really interesting when I was judging VASE was that the students had this emphasis on technique. And when I was being formally educated in art, there wasn't really as much emphasis on technique or specific techniques. I noticed that a lot of kids were talking about using grids. And for those unfamiliar, can you explain grids to our audience?
It's been that long, ago that I'm not really familiar with it anymore myself. I assume that when they were talking to you about grids, they meant it to use for like perspective and whatnot.
They were using it for life drawing and for still life.
Okay. And yeah, I think I kind of sort of know what they're talking
Okay,
about.
well, I know. I was giving the floor to you to explain it. But
Right.
I'll go ahead and explain. So gridding would be the process of drawing a grid over a piece of reference, like making some sort of like 1x1 square grid, and then when you're trying to replicate that on a canvas, you basically make another grid, but you scale it up.
Yes.
And you use that to study proportions, I assume.
Right.
I've never actually done that kind of thing myself.
Well, but the thing about it is that we never really did that in art class. The only time I would ever see that is in math class. Math class is where they would do that.
Yeah, I did that in my geometry classes. And I understand why they have students do it, because a lot of art and learning how to do art in general is about learning how to see. Everyone can see things, but you don't take special care to really realize what the shapes are like that you're looking at. Everyone has this general forms in their head. And so I guess the grid method is a way to teach students how to break down the things that they see into different shapes. But yeah, like that was one of the things that I noticed. Was that a lot of students talked about when I asked them about what techniques they used, about their process for creating the work. A lot of students mentioned grids, and there were a few other techniques too. And I found it really interesting that there was this emphasis on technique. And then when I later uh, when I was looking at the finalists and I was taking note of how other teachers were judging, and I didn't let that affect the way that I was judging. Of course, I noticed that a lot of teachers were very focused on things that showed a lot of technique,
Right.
whereas I was much more concerned with seeing things that I felt were creative and expressive.
On that note, that kind of sort of like takes the element of heart out of it to focus more on technique than, the creativeness like you just kept talking about. But, in school, they kind of don't allow for that. They are more concerned about, it seems like grades and whatnot,
Yeah, I imagine that the reason why there's this huge emphasis on technique is so that the teachers have some sort of objective grading criteria.
Right.
Because art education in college, you get critiqued a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it is based on subjectiveness, but also finding your way of expressing yourself. And so there wasn't really much emphasis on using specific techniques. And Stephen and I have had discussions about the things that we wanted to do with the channel. And I know that Stephen had mentioned wanting to do certain tutorials.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I find tutorials absolutely uninteresting. If I'm looking up a tutorial myself for something art related, I look at it once and I never look at it again. It's like I get the technique now. Now I'm moving on. And I'm always much more concerned about the thought process behind something, like what made an artist decide to take this route creatively. And I kind of felt that was a bit missing.
Right.
From a lot of the students when they talked about their art, there wasn't a lot about their creative process. It was more about their technique process. And I don't want to harsh on that. I don't think it's a bad way to educate. I think certainly that both are important. But I can also understand why public school teachers would need some sort of objective measure.
And see, that kind of thing is, and I'll just be real here. The 4 years I took art in high school, I didn't do as good as I could have. I made middling grades in, the advanced classes that I had, because honestly, you gotta want to do the art that you're doing. And I didn't want to do any of the things that, that they wanted me to do because there was no interest there. They've got to make it interesting for, for the students. And it seems like a lot of that is taken out of the equation. So when that's taken out of the equation, you're going to get like subpar results and whatnot. I don't know if it was the same for you in college. Maybe like the material wasn't as interesting, or
I went to school for animation, and I found it was education in a field that I wanted to learn.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, and so there's already this high amount of interest in what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
Now there were classes that I did not find as interesting, such as we had an industrial animation class where the whole goal of the class was to make some sort of industrial piece that was very, very catered towards the Houston animation market.
Right,
There's
right.
a lot of jobs in Houston related to doing architectural and oil form animations. And the specific subject I didn't find really interesting, but I still found creating the piece that I did for my industrial class to be really entertaining. I found the challenge of, you know, accurately conveying the textures of the building that I was making to be very interesting. So even though the subject matter itself wasn't all that, I wasn't all that hot on, I still had a lot of interest in the all the aspects of art in general and animation in general that you know, kept me wanting to be in the class. You know, that and also wanting to grade, of
Yeah,
course.
you gotta want it for the most part. You know, I feel like a large part of it was me not really wanting it. Although years later, uh, I will say that the lessons that I did learn in school, obviously, they did ultimately come in handy. You know,
Mm-hmm.
when I was in school, I wasn't interested in cross hatching and you know, stippling or whatever. But now I utilize that every single day because I want it. Uh, so yeah, there's something to be said for wanting it when, you know, when you're learning about it, and I don't think, you know, enough is being done to make them want it. So
I I can't really comment on that since I didn't go through the experience.
uh-huh.
But I do want to talk more about, you know, you mentioned, you know, learning the technique of cross hatching
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
and stippling,
Uh-huh.
and then that becoming important to you later as you made your own art. Was it never conveyed to you why you would choose a crosshatch, or other than like shading? Like what like I want to understand how they taught crosshatching. Was it just like here's a technique, go,
Uh,
or was it about, you know, here's why you would want to crosshatch. Here's what the kind of mood that it conveys. Here's why you would choose to stipple, because the end result is always shading.
right, right,
Both
right.
of those is to achieve. They're both shading techniques, um, but they just taught you the techniques. Did they go into anything that would make
No,
it
I
seem
mean, like,
valuable, or
you know, when they taught me the techniques, it was mostly to teach me about light and
okay,
shadow and
okay,
everything else. But, you know, like I said, you gotta want it. And at the time, you know, it's just like I wasn't interested in that. I wanted to just do comics, and at the time, I mostly utilized a clean style that didn't really call for shading or cross hatching or stippling. You know, it didn't really call for any of that. So it had more to do with my attention span as a student
I see.
than it did with, you know, how they taught it. I'm sure they taught it great. You know, I and any of my art teachers that are watching, I love you and everything else. I just wasn't paying attention in school. But um, you know, it wasn't something that I wanted then, but it's something that I want now. So when I started doing it, you know, in my work now, of course I had to look up tutorials, you know, and relearn the stuff. But it didn't really take all that long to do it. I I don't really think I'm all that great at it now. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I just know enough to fool people. So yeah, but yeah. Uh,
Yeah, because when I was in school, the only specific techniques, or only specific technique at all, was perspective,
yeah.
which I think is more of a concept
Hmm.
than a technique itself. It's kind of a way of looking at art kind of mathematically,
Right.
in a very geometric way. So I'm still very hard pressed to even call perspective a technique.
Hmm.
Um, but other than that, you know, we had our life drawing classes. We weren't told to, you know, make any kind of grids in order to accurately convey the anatomy that we were seeing.
Hmm.
You know, we had an anatomy class where you would study the structure of human bones and human muscles, and then we had life drawing classes where then you would have a model
Right.
and you'd put that all together. And I found that to be, you know, an incredible way of going about understanding the concepts. Is, you know, not really a technique itself, but you're discovering how you want to draw while you're learning core concepts of art. And that's really just the way that I've always learned.
Right.
appreciated learning things is especially because the experience that you had with art
Mm.
of not really being into it, not having that interest, is what I experienced growing up in music. Because
Right.
I took band since middle school all the way up to I think like my sophomore year of high school was when I quit it, and I found it highly. I found band in high school highly
Mm.
uninteresting. It was about learning scales, and it was about marching, and it was about sight reading, um, and I just and you know you're playing old music by dead composers.
Right.
Um, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it wasn't what I wanted to do, and it just turned everything into a chore.
Yes. That's
Uh,
yeah.
and then I quit, and then later in college, I was like, yeah, I want to learn to play the bass guitar, and I just turned it into something fun, and it was interesting to me. Um, and so I think that when learning the arts, interest is important. I think it's also important to learn your core concepts. I just don't think that certain techniques are your core concepts. I don't think that stippling is or cross hatching is something that requires specific classroom time
Right.
on because cross hatching is just like draw some lines. You're
Mm.
using lines to shade. Like if you just understand shading, you'll understand how you want to shade. Like stippling is just dots for shading. You can get some charcoal and rub it around, shading, or you can do spot blacks in a comic, and then add that with cross hatching, shading. The important concept there isn't the technique; it's the concept of light and shadow and how that works.
And see, even today, even utilizing that kind of stuff, you know, I'm bad at it. Like whenever you see me utilize stippling or cross hatching, that's me just putting stuff in random places where I think it should go. It shouldn't. Like I don't actually know what I'm doing. If I had actually,
So in that case, it's actually more important to know the
right,
concept
exactly,
of light and shadow as opposed to just the technique
right,
of stippling or cross hatching.
right, and it's like like I said, I just do enough just to fool people. I haven't had anybody call me out just yet. Like, hey, that's not supposed to go there, right? Like, hey, look, we're just here to have a good time here. So, but yeah, I think you're right. I mean, for instance, your work doesn't really call for that kind of thing, like cross hatching or stippling. It speaks for itself. It does it without having to go there. Not everybody knows that. I mean, there are plenty of artists out there that utilize that without, utilize a clean style without having to, use you know, that kind of technique in the first place. But I'm sure they know it just to know it.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I mean there are aspects where I will use it. Mostly my line art is going to be clean and flat.
Right.
And the most depth you're probably going to see out, especially something that we're looking at right now, Transaltown. The most amount of shading and depth you're going to see is probably in the line weight. Um, I'm more interested in conveying that in color.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm doing something in color, then I'll go to town. I love markers, and when I use markers, then I'm blending colors together, and I'm creating, different effects with lights and shadows and stuff like that. Is when I'm doing line work, especially for the style that I'm going for at Transaltown. It's not important until it is, and until I need to convey that light and shadow for some reason in black and white. On a page of Transaltown, but I try to keep Transaltown very, very clean looking.
The funny thing is, like, while I didn't listen a whole lot in school, not to veer too far off the subject, I remember the day that I discovered the power of foreshortening. When and it honestly it had to do. I think I was drawing a picture of surprise Superman, and he was flying towards towards the viewer, and when I started doing that, I wanted to do that more, and my art teachers noticed. They're like, "Oh, look at you!" Like I started getting a little bit better grades because they started like putting stuff my way that would interest me. You know, uh, I think that happened because I explored it on my own. I explored it myself, and I don't think students get enough opportunities to explore it on their own. They're being directed to it. I think it would be good if they got to accidentally stumble upon that kind of thing. You know.
Yeah, I think that the thing that I had noticed the most was that there was not as much emphasis on self-discovery in the arts from at least the students that I observed. I don't want to make generalizations about what art education is like everywhere, and I certainly don't want to say that the way that they're teaching students is bad either. I think, but I do feel as if your art education benefits a lot from self-exploration.
And that's the other thing. There are probably art teachers out there that feel that exact same way. Like they don't want, to teach what they're being told to teach. They want, to encourage their students to follow that kind of thing. They probably just want to, just have them run free from time to time, and everything else. So I think there are teachers out there that would totally empathize with what we're talking about. That being said, we're not teachers ourselves.
Exactly. And that said, I still understand why they have the emphasis on technique. I think there's some history that's learned through it. If you talk especially about stippling, you can talk about creators that use stippling techniques. I think that it gives you an appreciation for different things to try out. But I also what I observed felt a little bit too rigid. But that said, I don't want to, if you're a high school student or if you're on your way to high school and you're watching this video, I don't want to discourage you from taking high school art classes. I think, like I will always say, that having a grounded, well-rounded education in art is going to help whatever style you want to dive into in the future. I think that I would have benefited a lot more from having some guidance before I entered college,
right,
as an artist. And that's certainly something that I was focused on other things at that time in my life, but I think now it's like, oh well, that could have been a good thing to do.
And I probably would have benefited more if I had paid attention more. And like Isaiah, I also focused on other things as well at that point in time. That around ninth grade, that's also when I started picking up guitar. So art took a back seat, and I was intent on becoming a rock star. But obviously you're not buying my records, so so that didn't happen. But yeah, this video isn't to discourage you from taking classes, and please don't go and rebel against any teachers you may have. Don't go start a revolution simply because the guys from the single issue told you to do it or whatever. Still learn everything you want to learn. Pay attention. Because what you learn today that you might not be interested in, this kind of sort of goes against what I've been saying earlier. But what you learn today that you might not be interested in could come in handy later on in life. When your teachers are telling you you're going to need this someday, chances are they aren't lying. Unless it's math. I go out of my way not to add stuff anymore. So
my sister is a math teacher.
Hi.
You're gonna get me in trouble with that line.
Oh boy.
Math is useful. But that's all we've got time for today. So thanks a lot, and we'll see you guys next week. If you like our work, we both got Patreons. Those will be in the description below. And thanks a lot for watching.
All right, bye guys.
Thanks a lot for watching this video, everyone. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you like what we do, such as our comics or these videos in general, feel free to check out our Patreons. Every single little bit helps us create more. And if you want to watch more videos, we've got the previous issue of the single issue right there. And over there, we've got the time lapse of the Falcon sketch card that you saw earlier in the video. See you guys next time.